Hi and welcome to Ottawa English. I'm Angela. In this video we're going to take a look at the CELPIP email so you know that the email can be formal, or it can be semi-formal, or it can be informal. And you need to be comfortable writing all three types of email. So let's take a look at when you use it. So before we get into it, I'd like to take a moment to remind you that when you work with a tutor, you turn your passive learning into active learning, you target the things that matter, and you save time trawling through YouTube. So if you find my video helpful and you'd like more of that kind of help as you prepare for CELPIP, do give me a call at 613-614-6460. You can also email me, angela@ottawa-english.com. So you could be asked to write several different types of emails. You can be asked to write an email applying for a job, thanking somebody, congratulating someone, requesting something from someone, or complaining about something. You could be asked to write a letter of reference. You could be asked to invite somebody to something, and you can be asked to apologize. So all of those different types of emails can be formal, semi-formal, or informal. It all depends. So when you think about your letter and who you are writing it and who it is that's going to receive it, you need to be thinking about the box that they belong to. So one box is your bosses, your clients, your officials, like your passport officials or the people at the immigration who are looking at your residency permit. Or you might be a business owner. We've also got a box for our colleagues, neighbours and acquaintances. These are people we don't know very well. We know their name, we might recognise them if we saw them on the street, but we don't know them really well. Whereas family and friends, those are all the people that we know really well. When bosses, clients, officials and business owners communicate with each other, then they use the semi-formal tone. So if your question asks you to write to another business owner as a business owner, you would be using a semi-formal style. Same thing if you were writing to a neighbour or an acquaintance that you don't know very well. Whereas if you know the person really well, your style is going to be informal. When you reach outside your box, that's when it's formal. So when you look at your writing prompt for the email in the CELPIP test, you want to identify both the person that you're writing to, so who are you writing to, but also who you are. So for example, in this prompt, write an email to your manager requesting some time off. Well, if this person is my manager, then I must be an employee, which means I'm leaving my box. And so this email would be formal. If I'm writing an email applying for a job, then I'm not an employee. I'm a regular person and I'm writing to somebody outside of my box. So this one is also formal. In this prompt, write an email to your co-worker. So that's somebody I work with. So that must be semi-formal because I'm writing within my box. An email to a fellow business owner. So that means I'm a business owner and I'm writing to another business owner. So that also would be semi-formal. And finally, write an email to your aunt. Now I'm writing to a person who's in the friends and family box, somebody that I know really well. And so that would be informal. So let's take a look at the first one, the formal email. So this is the one where I'm writing to my manager, which means that I must be an employee writing to somebody outside my box. So stop the video for a moment if you want to familiarize yourself with the content of that email. What I'd like to draw your attention to is that in the formal email, if I don't know the person's name and it's a man, I can use dear sir or dear madam. If I don't know if it's a man or a woman, I can still use dear sir or dear madam. It's an understandable thing. If I do know the name, so if the writing prompt gives me the name, if it might say Alan Smith, I would only use the last name with the abbreviation. So MS would be for a woman who's, I don't know if she's married or not. Mr. with the last name would be for a man, and Mrs. with the last name would be for a married woman. I would sign that email regards, comma. So the name has a comma at the end, and regards has a comma at the end. And then I would sign both my first and my last name. So you can see in the email here that I've got Jenny May. A couple of other things that make it formal are that I've used complete sentences. Thank you for considering my request. I haven't said, look forward to hearing from you. Okay, it's a complete sentence. I've also used the passive voice in several places. That is part of increasing the formality of the email. And I haven't used any contractions. So I haven't said I'm or I'll. I've used both words. If you're a little confused about the passive, what I mean is there are two ways of talking about pretty much anything. So with the active voice, when we're describing this man washing the window, we would say, John is washing the window. If we didn't want to identify John, we would say, the window is being washed. The lady who's cooking, we would say, Mary cooks dinner, but in the passive voice, we'd say, dinner is cooked. And with the mouse and the cat was chasing the mouse would be the active form. But if we didn't want to mention the cat, we would just say, the mouse was being chased by the cat, but we don't care about the cat. Okay, so we don't identify the subject. So this is another formal email where I'm applying for a job. I'm a regular person, I'm not an employee, and I'm writing an email to somebody who's not in my box. Go ahead and stop the video for a moment if you want to familiarize yourself with the content. What I'd like to draw your attention to is that I've used Dear Sir because I don't know this person's name. I've also signed off regards, comma. I've got my first and last name. I've written with complete sentences. I look forward to hearing from you. I've used my passive voice in several places, and I've used full words with no contractions. I am and I have. In this email, we're going to use a semi-formal style because it identifies that I'm a worker writing to another worker in my company. And so here, because I know the person a little bit, I use their name. So I'm not going to use Dear Sir, and I'm not going to use Dear Madam. I'm still going to sign off regards, and I'm still going to use my first and last name because it's semi-formal. It's still quite formal, but not the highest level of formality. And then I'm going to use my complete sentences, but I'm not going to use any passive voice because it's semi-formal. So I don't need that passive voice to help me increase the level of formality. And I'm also not going to use any contractions. So if you look at all of these sentences, I've used both words. I am, not I'm. Will not won't. You were, not your. Who is, not whose, and so on. So let's take a look at another semi-formal email. This one is to a business owner. So the writing prompt tells me that I'm a business owner and I'm writing to another business owner. So my tone is going to be semi-formal because I'm working within that box. I know the person's name, so I'm going to use the last name, even if it says Ms. Tabitha Jones. I would still only use Dear Ms. Jones, comma. I've used regards, comma. That's exactly the same as the formal. I've used the first and last name. I've used complete sentences. I look forward to your response. I haven't used any passive voice because I don't need to increase the level of formality. And I haven't used any contractions. I am, not I'm. Concern is, not concerns. And finally, in this email, where we're writing to our aunt, I know that I'm in the family and friends box, and therefore my communication will be informal. So I'm only going to use the first name, Dear Joe, or if I want, I can do Dear Uncle Joe or Dear Aunt Joanne. Here I've used Dear Aunt Greta. It's a little bit respectful because the person's older than I am. I sign off, thanks, comma, and then I just write my first name. You'll notice that I've got incomplete sentences in 2 places, just a note, and looking forward to hearing from you. And I've also used contractions all the way through. So not you would, but you'd. Not you have, but you've, and so on. So in summary, when it's formal, if you don't know the person's name, use Dear Sir or Dear Madam. If you don't know their sex, choose one or the other. Sign off with regards and your first and last name. Use complete sentences, the passive voice, and don't use any contractions. The semi-formal style is very similar, only this time you do know the name of the person, so you use the last name with a comma. You can still use regards. You still sign off with your first and last name. You still use complete sentences. You still don't use any contractions, but you use the active voice, not the passive voice. And for the informal email, Dear Joe, so you're going to use the first name. If you want, you can write Uncle Joe or Aunt Joanne. You sign off, thanks. You sign off with your first name. You use incomplete sentences and you use contractions.